Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's session, Houston's chapter, Developing and Maintaining Company Culture Today. I'm Janae Golden. I'm the Regional Director for the CFO Leadership Council. Also being joined with Katie Todd, helping me facilitate today's session. So welcome, welcome. As always, we put the program handout in the chat section. We will do that momentarily, so everybody will have access to it. In that handout is our upcoming events, website, information on our speakers, registration list, and again, the website, which is a great place to go if you have any questions on who we are, what we're about, and our 26 chapters across the US. So certainly I'm available to answer any questions you may have as well. We want to thank our sponsors for without them, this partnership with the CFO Leadership Council probably would not have survived through the last 12 months. So they have shared in resources and really allowing us to thrive during this time. And so they are invaluable to us. So our sponsors for the Houston chapter is NetSuite Oracle, Bank of America, RSM, Lockton, and Bracewell. So we ask that if you are evaluating any services within their wheelhouse, if you wouldn't mind giving them the opportunity to evaluate with you. So we ask that our sponsors, if you're on this call, put your contact information in the chat section so our attendees can reach out to you directly. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. We ask that during the session that everybody turns their videos off and mutes their lines once we get started. And then when we have our Q&A session, feel free to turn those back on and unmute your lines if you want to ask questions directly. But we do encourage questions throughout. Katie will be checking the chat section, so feel free to put those in that area. If you want to message Katie directly and remain anonymous with your question, feel free to do that too. So we encourage this to be your session and ask those questions of our speakers today. We will have CPE credits, so we will have polling, and we will launch those in the background, so we won't be interrupting the session to get those to you. Katie will put a reminder in the chat section on when you can expect those, 60 seconds or 30 seconds, so be on the lookout for that. And we will be sharing the results of those throughout as well. All right, let's get started. At this time, we ask that our speakers to turn on their videos and everyone else turn theirs off and mute your lines. And this is where I will share the tip of the day. If you prefer to view the screen with just the speakers and you don't want to see all the names and the blank screens, you can do that by hovering over your blank screen in the three dots in the upper right-hand corner. Select Hide Non-Participants. When you want to see those during Q&A, make sure you turn that feature off. And everybody's view is customized to whatever you like to see it. So make sure you check out some of those options in the top right-hand corner. In the view, there's like a Rubik's Cube right next to it. So that is that, and yours truly is moderating today's session. So I'm very excited to have these speakers today. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. It is a topic that comes up quite often in all of our chapters, especially over the last 12 months, is how do you develop and maintain culture in our environment today. And so I know our speakers are going to share their insights from a technical and expert view from our Lockton speaker, and also from a CFO's perspective and what they're doing in their organization. So it should be a great panel. And feel free to put in the chat section some of the things that you're doing in response to the questions that I'm asking them, because I think all of us collectively learn from each other. And if we have a lot of chatter in the chat, we'll be sure and share those with you after the program. So without further ado, let's learn more about our speakers. So we'll start with you, Kelly. Share a little bit about yourself.
Good morning, Janine. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Kelly Reed with Lockton Companies. For those of you who aren't familiar with Lockton Companies, Lockton is the world's largest privately held insurance brokerage. I am the founder and managing director of, excuse me, Lockton's Talent and Culture Group, where we have the privilege to work with our clients as the world's first and currently only no-cost brokerage for the rest of the world of HR that has to do with talent and culture, consulting, experts, and software, and looking forward to today's conversation. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. Jerry, you want to go next?
Sure. Good morning. I'm Jerry Pacheco. I'm the CFO for Archon Corporation. We're a commercial builder here in Houston. I've been with Archon for, it'll be 11 years in March, and have been a CFO controller for close to 30 years. I hate to put that number out there, or 25, I'll round down. And just really happy to be here today and be part of the conversation. I've overseen HR and actually started out in HR in my career path. So I've always, this part of my CFO role is something I really enjoy doing.
Excellent. And the newest member of our steering committee in Houston. So welcome. I had to put that plug in. And straight to one of our steering committee meeting or co-chairs in Dallas. Want to welcome Chris Doty. You want to share a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. My name is Chris Doty. I'm the CFO for CFA. We're based here in Dallas. We're a software as a service company geared mostly towards asset managers, so hedge funds, mutual funds, third-party administrators, and so forth. So I've been the CFO. We started the company in 2012, been the CFO since 2014. But I actually helped our CEO and owner launch the company kind of in the moonlighting phase while I was at my previous employer. So we are a fast growing company, just took our first Series A this past summer. We have offices in Dallas, New York, and we literally in the last 6 months have branched into Houston. We don't have an office yet, but we do have remote workers in Houston. So and then we have a presence in Ireland and India as well. But happy to be here and honored to be included in this conversation.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, thank you all. And I want to start with, something that when I thought about this topic, I really took myself back in time on, what my experience was with culture. And, I started in sales and did 20 years in sales and worked for some great companies. And I really can think of those employers that just had, such a great culture. And I really, when I'm looking at my past employers, which one really had that down, and it was just great. So I want to ask that of you as we, find a starting point. Tell me about a company you worked for that you thought had a great culture and why. And if you don't have a good story, then maybe share a story of bad culture. We'll start with you, Jerry.
So I've worked in a lot of smaller entrepreneurial type companies as the CFO controller, and probably about 4 or 5 different companies that have had different in different life cycles, startup companies. So starting, really from a box of receipts, a shoebox of receipts, all the way to working for larger organizations. And I would say the best culture, to be honest, has been here at Archon for the last 11 years. And when I first started, we were small. We only had about 18 employees, and we've grown to almost 180 in the 11 years that I've been here. And the one thing that we've tried to maintain in our culture, it's been very collaborative, I would say, and also, not sure if this is the best way to say it, but a non-blaming culture. So I've worked at companies in the past where, it's more about whose fault it is rather than how to solve the problem. And I would say it's the exact opposite here. So we really focus on, okay, that happened, but what can we do to prevent it going forward, and how do we fix it? And so that part of our culture, I think, has been, it's not a particular instance or event, it's just an ongoing theme in our business. I think that that's what's been able to help us really grow. People come in, especially more experienced people, and it takes them a little while to kind of unlearn that CYA attitude that you sometimes build up at other companies. And it takes a little while to really believe that that's true, that here, you know, it's not about who's at fault. It's really about, you know, how do we make it better?
Great. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I'll briefly touch on one and why it leads me to the other. At CoreLogic, we were, you know, multi-billion-dollar company with 10,000 plus employees worldwide. And what I loved about that company was its continued focused effort on culture. To have that big of a company, a publicly traded company, a large corporation, they really put just a concerted focus on culture and the people, and we're geographically dispersed around the United States and in the world, and that is no easy undertaking. But when we started CFA, that's what we wanted to make sure that we had from the ground up. We started the company with 5 employees, and we really wanted to make sure that this was a place that people wanted to be, because people spend a lot of their times working, whether it's remote or in the office. It's about making sure that they want to be here, right? Your job is your job. You can do whatever you do for your career. You can do it anywhere, whether it's a CPA or a software developer or an HR consultant. So we really focused on that to start with. And what I love about our culture here is we focus on our core values, but it's more about empowering our people. We make them a part of the culture from the start, from the day they walk in, actually in the interview process, and we can touch on that later. But we're completely transparent, you know, with everything that we do in our company, and we expect the same from our people. And then it's about building trust. If your people will trust you, and then you can provide that environment that makes them actually feel it, and you don't just talk about it, then it's amazing how much more you can get out of people from just their sense of feeling good about where they're at every single day. And so that's what we focused on here, and that's why I think it's helped us grow our company. It's about the people. I know it's a cliche thing to say, but if you don't back it up, then it is just words.
Yeah, so true, so true. And Kelly, what can you share with us?
Sure. Well, I really appreciate what Chris just shared, and a lot of that resonates with me. I can share with you that I feel really fortunate that the places I've worked, I feel like all have had really fantastic cultures. That I think the defining moments, and there's themes right across, is really what culture looks like in crisis. And I think for many organizations, this past year has been a real test of that. And I think it's easy for organizations to walk the walk and talk the talk when times are good. But when times get tough, that's really where the true culture of the company shows. And you know, I'll tell you at Lockton this past year, and again from a culture and crisis perspective, I feel very fortunate to work for organizations, you know, Lockton specifically, where that walking the walk around, or walking the talk rather, around culture has come through loud and clear. When times do, you know, get tough or there's challenges, it's met with a people first mentality, and that includes clients and associates. So how can we, you know, the first thought from the leadership team is, what do we need to do to make sure that we are taking care of our people? What do we need to do to make sure that we are taking care of our clients? It is not a, you know, what do we do to make sure that we are taking care of our profits and gaining as much as we can during this time? It is, we are in the business of people, and we believe strongly that by having the best people, and like Chris said, creating an environment where they want to come to work and they can do their best, that is the key to our success. And now more than ever, we have to do what we can to make sure that we're letting people know that that's what we're all about. That's how we do business. So I think for organizations that have kind of taken an opportunity over the past year and reflected on, you know, where they might have done things differently, going into 2021 is a great opportunity to start putting into place some of the lessons learned from reflecting on what could we have done better, or how could we have handled that differently as we're moving into the next phase of the COVID-19 crisis.
That is a really good point. And I love what you said about during a crisis is really kind of a time to to shine for organizations. And, it just made me think about my experience, and, it wasn't a crisis that the world was going through, but I was going through a crisis in this particular company. So it does resonate on both sides, company and employee. And it was an opportunity where that organization, the people in that organization really, made me feel that they cared about me. But more so than anything, when you have a culture like that, it doesn't matter. To me, it didn't matter what I was selling. In fact, I hated what I was selling. But the people were my friends. My manager really communicated and did a good job making me feel like she cared about me. And I loved it there. So that is a really, really good point. And I know each of you shared a little bit about your culture today in that past question. So this may be a little bit redundant, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because there may be some things that you want to share. But I'd be curious to know, what your culture was pre-COVID, and then, how you would say it's changed once COVID hit, and how you adapted to it. So want to start with Chris on that one.
No, thank you. Yeah, I think pre-COVID, again, we try to practice what we preach every day with culture. It's a very, very core part of our business, and part of who we are as a company. And we try to instill that upon everybody. And just to dovetail real quick on what you said, Janae, and that is, it's not just a company culture, it's really the subcultures within the company, right? You can have a great company culture, but if your leaders or even the people from the ground up aren't living and breathing that every day and practicing what we preach, then it renders your culture fragmented, right? And so you may be doing all the great things at a corporate level, but if people aren't carrying that out, then you're going to have unhappy people somewhere down the line, and then you got to pinpoint and focus why they're not happy. Where is the breakdown? But I mean, again, I talked about our core values, and I know that again that can be cliche, but we don't just put them in writing. We try to live them every day. We talk about collaboration, which is a huge component of both working in the office or working remotely. Having a purpose with what you're doing every single day. And again, redefining that or revisiting that each and every day, depending whether it's a pandemic or not. We promote a constant commitment of continuous improvement. You got to be able to look at yourself in the mirror. You got to be able to stand up next to your peers and say, this is what I'm doing well, and this is what I'm not doing well. And then we focus on equality in the workplace, whether it's people with different backgrounds or people with different levels in the organization. And we focus on what's their passion. What are you passionate about, whether it's a project, your everyday work, what are you passionate about outside of the office, and those types of things. But obviously the pandemic's put a very big strain on all of this. We're a cloud-based software company with the ability to work anywhere in the world, but we really want our people in an office collaborating together in person and having that human touch. So it's had a significant impact on both that relationship building, the collaboration, as well as our productivity. There's a study out there that I just read the other day that 52% of respondents said that they're less productive working from home than they are in the office. And we've seen that as well. So we've had to adapt and come up with new mechanisms to both evaluate what that production looks like, and then how do you react and do it in a way that's constructive to the people that you're trying to focus on increasing their productivity. And then we've had to adapt. Video conferencing, number one, right? That's what everybody talks about, Zoom, WebEx, whatever, Teams. And then we've had to do remote onboarding. And then we've had, and then to focus on like the positive side of things, remote happy hours, remote lunches, where people don't want to necessarily drink or eat on camera, but when you kind of get people used to it, like, hey, it's no different than eating in front of me in a kitchen or at a restaurant. And so we've tried to focus on those. We've incorporated a CEO Ask Me Anything session once a week, to where people can either submit questions anonymously or in person or live, it doesn't matter, just giving them any way, shape, or form to get the communication channel flowing both ways. We used to give out holiday gifts every year at a holiday party and had to suspend the party, but we went and mailed the gifts to every single person's home. Just things like that, just to say, we haven't forgotten about you, and you're still important to us. But there are also things that we could have done better. We're in a rapid growth stage at our company, and with that, you tend to lose focus on certain things. And when you're remote and everybody's just banging away doing what they're doing, we kind of lost focus a little bit on our culture. We're not perfect by any stretch, and it also stretched our resources. And so people who were able to spend part of their time focusing on culture found their days filling up quite a bit. And so the dispersion of the team and the rapid growth of our company really put a strain, and we're making a concerted effort every day to try to figure out what can we do better.
That's great. I love the CEO ask him anything. That could be good and bad, right?
Careful what you wish for.
I know. I was like, wow.
We do have to answer them in full transparency. And again, building that trust. If we told you to ask, we have to be willing to answer.
Yeah, that's so true. Really making the executive accessible. I love that. Jerry, what about you? Prior pandemic or pre-pandemic and now pandemic's here. How has your culture changed and how have y'all adapted?
So as a construction company, we're a commercial construction company. We build office buildings and hotels and multifamily apartments and things like that. So we were deemed essential workers from the beginning. So we have had pretty much in the field has stayed on site working. So our culture, of working hard, very deadline oriented. Obviously, we have to complete the buildings on time. Our retail establishments especially have to still open. The multifamily units, we do a lot of student housing, so they still have to open when the students need the housing. So a lot of our cultural things had to remain. They had to stay in place. It wasn't a choice. So, but we did have office employees who worked remotely, and we went to split schedules where we had a green team and a yellow team. And so half of our office was working from home 3 days a week, and the other half was in the office. We did this from about March until June. We tried to come back in June, and then it just wasn't working. We had people testing positive. So we went back to a remote or to a split shift until about September. But frankly, our office has been back full time since September. And we've had to really adapt in terms of our culture and safety here in the office. We got a standalone temperature machine like you'd see at the nail salons. So everybody has to check their temperature every day. You have to wear a mask if you're walking around outside of your office or outside of your immediate work area. We've had some people, especially on the job sites, we've had quite a few people test positive. We'd have to send people home, sanitize the job sites. We were still sanitizing our office. I think once every other week we have someone come in and spray disinfectant throughout the offices. So we've tried to, in every way that we can, to keep the culture the same. We did a lot of similar things that Chris was talking about in terms of trying to stay connected to our teams. So we have quarterly meetings where we would go to a local restaurant, local Mexican restaurant, and have margaritas, and it would be a 3-hour quarterly meeting, and probably 10 or 15 people would present. We pivoted that into a 1-hour quarterly meeting on Zoom, and it's actually been, in some ways, to me, better because we're able to show our presentation. People can see it better. There's no, A/B issues and things like that. So we've narrowed it down to there's only 3 presenters, and we're in and out in an hour. And I think some folks are preferring that. It's still that same connection. You still get to see everyone on the Zoom, but the communication is much more succinct and efficient. So we've maintained our quarterly meetings. One of the things that we do is as an incentive for people, or really an award, is after 5 years, you get a Rolex watch as an award for your tenure with the company. And in the past, we've always done that at a big Christmas event. We've had a big party and it's at a hotel and a dinner, and we couldn't do that this year. And that really hurt. It was really difficult. But instead, we went to our CEO's house. He welcomed us in. We did it 2 employees at a time, where they came and they were presented their watch. It was a really intimate setting. We had a videographer there, so we captured it all. We showed the video at our quarterly meeting the next week, and it really was special for those employees because they got to go be with the CEO and meet his family, and all of us who are shareholders in the company were there as well. So it was a group of about 10 people, I think, at any one given time. And that's something that we'll probably continue to do. So there have been some silver linings out of all of this that we found that we wouldn't have thought of had it not been for the pandemic. And just, I think probably communications is key when you've got people working from home, or, we've got people out in the field that never come in the office. So we have to find better ways, and we continue to strive and work on better ways of communicating with everyone.
Great point. Gosh, I want to work for your company. I need a Rolex watch.
This is my 5-year.
5 years, you get one?
Yeah, 5 years.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to talk to Jack. Goodness. Oh my gosh, that's nice. Well, Kelly, what can you share with us on this topic? I mean, you work for a large organization. That perspective would be interesting, and also, how you see some of your clients dealing with this.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the way that it has shifted for us is similar to, I think, how it has shifted for a lot of organizations since COVID. We at Lockton, so we have about 7,500 employees, associates globally, and wide geographic distribution. So our largest office has about 1,000 employees. And the rest are geographically dispersed across offices around North America and the rest of the world. We were largely in person. I mean, almost 100% in person before COVID hit, and really had a strong belief that part of what made our culture special was being together, right? And this physical togetherness. And after COVID hit, I mean, within the span of a matter of days, we went from almost entirely in person to almost completely virtual, and remain that way today. I think we still have fewer than 10% that are working from the office globally. So we've really had to adapt our culture practices during that time. And a lot of that came from, how do we foster a sense of togetherness in a place where we can't physically be together? And so that has come from a variety of things. The town hall concept and the virtual, ask me anythings with the top leaders. Our organization, regardless of how much it's grown over the years, has really always prided itself on being a flat organization where leadership is accessible. And so that went on overdrive with COVID, with Zoom calls and WebEx meetings and things like that. But we also implemented Workplace by Facebook, which is something that we had underway before COVID hit. And then we just accelerated the deployment of that when COVID hit, and we're able to get it up in a remarkably fast fashion. Facebook actually even has Lockton, I think, is one of their success stories, or won an award for how Workplace by Facebook was used this past year. But that really became a fantastic platform to facilitate that togetherness, to provide a place for our employee resource groups to come together. We stood up a number of additional resource groups around things like working parents, mental health and well-being. And so there were just a whole host of things that we were able to do via that platform. We've seen a lot of organizations use Microsoft Teams or Slack in a similar way, and bringing the fun to those virtual things, right? Just because we can't be physically together doesn't mean that we can't still create a work environment that's fun, where we can have honest conversations and authentic connections with one another. So we've seen fun things like, weekly challenges. And I think some of that has trickled off, but especially in the early days of COVID, silly weekly challenges where we can all have the ugliest Christmas sweater contest, or guess the baby photo contest, or virtual random lunch and learns where people can essentially put their names in a drawing about, hey, I'd love to have a coffee, virtual coffee with anyone. I don't care who it is, but just some way to kind of do the coffee, coffee break room. virtually kind of concept. So we've seen a lot of organizations take the essence of what makes their culture special and those traditions and then say, look, we don't have to get rid of those. We can adapt those. And in fact, maybe even in some ways improve upon them if we can think creatively about the opportunity here that being in a virtual environment brings us.
It's always nice to take yourself off mute. That's super interesting. And I love that. In the Facebook thing, I was trying to conceptually understand how that looks like, which I guess it's kind of like Teams and Slack. So that's an interesting story. I would like to learn more about offline, but great. Thank you for that, Kelly. And really, it's kind of teeing us up for the next question I have. And you know, not an executive by any means, but culture touches me on a employee level. And, you know, there's a part of me that just thinks, you know, culture is about connection and relationships. And, you know, if that's the case, then how does an organization continue to build culture without an office? And I know we've touched on some ideas and stuff, but, you know, how would you answer that question?
Was that for Kelly or for me? What was it for?
Oh, I'm sorry. It was for Kelly.
Sorry, I was waiting to be called on. I think we're all in these panels where it's like, who do you want to go?
That's great.
Yeah, sure. No, and I think it's just building on an extension of what I just shared, right? You know, I think to your point, it's exactly right. I mean, it is a lot about, and not all about, because there's certainly things that can detract from that, but a lot of it is about relationships and connections and making sure to really focus on and emphasize the human experience at work. And so what we found with organizations that have really successfully adapted their cultures to the post, you know, I shouldn't say post-COVID world, but the COVID reality that we have now is really to ensure that what they are doing, how they're making decisions, how they're communicating, how they're, you know, reinforcing behavior and deterring behavior that could potentially detract from the human experience. It's all about how do we really focus on being human, demonstrating empathy, and making decisions that align with that people first mentality. You can, of course, from a cultural perspective, go beyond that, right? Because there's things beyond just the decisions that are made and the behaviors and the communication, things like the systems that we have in place, the processes we have in place, the rewards, you know, rewards and reinforcement that we have for different types of behaviors. So I think organizations also need to systematically and have been looking at those systems and processes to really understand what do we need to have in place now in this world. And then as we're starting to think about moving into the future in the post-COVID world, what do we need to start putting in place in order to create and reinforce the kind of culture that we want to have, the kind of best possible version of what our culture looks like. We've seen a lot of things around, you know, adapting culture practices that can fit a work from anywhere model, building all of this from a mindset of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and building around DEI principles. That, of course, has been another really, really crucial topic at the forefront of business conversations and societal conversations over the past year. Thinking about the people who were remote before, who were on the road a great deal before, you know, those folks were maybe disenfranchised before as kind of a silent minority within the organization, but now for many organizations that may be the silent majority or vocal majority perhaps. And, you know, when we can go back, will we go back, you know, or will there continue to be a substantial amount of the workforce that's working from home, you know, a good deal of the time or some of the time? And if so, how do we adapt our culture practices around that? I think a lot of this really starts by understanding your employee segments. Every organization has different, you know, key segments of employees and what their needs are. We've seen a pretty dramatic shift in the past year of how organizations are doing things like measuring employee engagement or measuring the employee experience, moving from like a once a year or every other year, you know, big survey to now more of this frequent pulse surveys around a few key questions that matter. So we're seeing a much faster shift to this continuous listening where organizations are using these real-time pulsing type surveys to be able to understand what their employees need and what their employee experience is like. So if we understand having that data, and as finance leaders, hopefully you'll appreciate that we have more access to data now and easier ways to access this data to really understand our employee segments and their needs, and being able to understand that aligned with some of these key moments that matter in the talent life cycle, from recruitment to retirement to promotions to coming back from leave, and be able to design our culture practices around those moments that matter. So I think there's a whole host of things that people can do. And then I think the last thing I would add there is the importance of leadership. And I mean, leadership at every level, top level leadership and frontline leadership. This has been maybe one of the biggest tests of leadership in pretty much any leader's career, even those that are well tenured and well seasoned. They're facing challenges that they've never faced before. And we've seen an extraordinary level of investment from organizations in this time in helping to equip their leaders around development, coaching, training, just spending time with them to help ensure that they are equipped to make decisions, to demonstrate actions, and to communicate in a way that's really going to be able to support people and be able to carry forward the culture in that way.
Wow, that is jam-packed with stuff. Thank you for that, Kelly. Good stuff. I think I saw in the chat section that we have a question, Katie. Was I right in seeing that? Multitasking.
So we did have a comment from Dale who
Oh.
said, we've been doing a finance virtual lunch every 2 weeks. The idea came from a CFOLC call last year, and everyone has come to really like it. Just one rule, no work talk.
I love that, Dale. Thanks for sharing that. Thank you, Katie. Well, Jerry and Chris, do y'all have anything that you'd like to add on that question? And it's about connection and relationships, and how do you continue to build that without an office?
Yeah, I think just, our team, I'll just kind of get down into the micro world of our finance team. There's about 10 of us here at Arcana. We work in a separate suite. So we're very close knit, and we have kind of a bullpen that our project accountants work in. So they're very, much a family in there, and they work together very closely. So when we had to go to this 50-50 split, and we had people at home, people in the office, we're still a little bit in the 20th century in terms of payment. For example, we still write checks, hand signed checks. We don't pay via ACH. So that paper process of printing checks, distributing checks, March 13th or whatever day it was that the world shut down, that was a big thing that we had to figure out, how did we manage that? And then when half of the staff was at home and wasn't here able to release their checks, they had to start working with each other and supporting each other and taking on tasks that they had to do on top of everything else that they had to complete. So I think that, that was a huge shift, and it was a huge amount of support that we had to give each other. And it worked because we all pitched in, myself included. I had an industrial printer at my house for about 4 months, an office grade printer in my front entryway, so I could print at checks at home if I had to, which I had to on many occasions, just to keep the paper flowing. But I think the biggest thing out of that I learned from it is that not everybody responds the same way to handling that kind of stress or change. And so we had a couple of employees that really struggled. Some people live alone, and so they're home alone 24/7, and it really impacted people. Other people with families, they didn't have a separate workspace, so they were working from a kitchen table with 3 kids at home, and it was a struggle, and it really impacted them. And so one of the things that we tried really hard to do was have frequent Zoom calls, check in with people every day, have a face-to-face, if you will, on Zoom, every day if we needed to, just to check in and make sure that people were doing okay, they had what they needed. We'd courier over paper, ink if they needed it, if their printer ink ran out. So we just tried to make sure that everybody was really equipped with the tools that they needed in order to be productive. But I think, just for me, the biggest takeaway was really empathizing and recognizing that not everybody reacts or feels the same way about, having to work remotely, and to just respect that. We had people begging to come back to the office in the middle of a pandemic. So.
And we had employees who, to your point, live in a 1-bedroom studio. They're single, no kids, no family, and they're basically telling us, like, I'm going out of my mind. I need to get back into the office. And so, we had to we put rules in place to close the office and say, okay, we're not coming back for a certain amount of time. But we had one person who said, I can't continue to do this after like 2 months. And so we changed our policy, made sure people were okay with it, and allowed that person to come to the office. They were the only one here. But it changed them completely, and so we were able to adapt to help that one person. And to your point, Jerry, it helps you understand and empathize or put yourself into the other people's shoes, right? I think about, well, I've got a wife and 2 kids at home and they're driving me nuts, right? Well, the person who doesn't have a wife and 2 kids can also be driven nuts, right? So you have to really kind of step out of yourself, if you will, and look at other people. I think for us, with all the craziness that was going on back in the March, April timeframe of last year, you're so quick to get set up to do everything remotely and kind of shift gears and do a lot of things. We lost track, if you will. And we're a small company, so we all wear many hats, and so we lost a little bit of our focus when it came to culture and doing those very things that we prided ourselves on. And so one of the things that, again, we're very transparent. People are open and honest with each other. So people chimed in and said, hey, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? And so we put somebody in charge, focused solely on culture. Like, that's their first and foremost responsibility in the company. And we also renamed our group. It used to be called the Fun Committee. And so we came up with another cheeky name and changed the name to the Culture Club. So cue the Boy George.
Love them.
The music. And even though we have a lot of millennials, they knew who the Culture Club was. So that was kind of interesting. And they came up with the name. And so just fun little things like that. And to touch on what Kelly said, just focus on ways to be creative with rewards, because you want to make sure that when productivity's kind of waning in certain areas, to still stay focused on the people that are doing great things and that have gone over and above to make the extra effort of printing checks at their home or whatever it may be, right? And then the other thing that we did was start to push the concept of sharing your personal wins. Right now, I think people are more personally engaged with their fellow employees or with the executives in the company more so than they used to be. So, what accomplishments did your kids have, or what accomplishment did you have? What were you able to do today that you couldn't do yesterday because of the pandemic? Whether it's go out for a run or go to a state park that finally opened, or share photos of that or videos, to, again, keep that positive thinking going in ways that you can be creative. And then when we were doing video conferences, if they're mostly on the culture side, if they're happy hours or whatever, we would say, hey, a person had a baby, and everybody was like, we want to see the baby. And so, his wife brought the baby in, and we got to see the baby and talk to him about his what's life like for a new father and those things. Or my kid would come in and sit on my lap and say hi to everybody, and then shoot out. And we have a lot of pet owners, so everybody wants to see each other's dogs and cats. So just to lighten it up a little bit and take our focus off of first the heavy workload, but secondly the pandemic itself and all the stress and fear and concern that comes with it. I think that really helped. And then touch again on what Kelly said, the pulsing. We've had to be more diligent about talking to people about what's going on, addressing areas of lost productivity. How do you engage people in a way that doesn't, discourage them or whatever? And
that's our next one. That's our next question. You can't give that away.
I know, but yes, that was something that we focused on as well, is how do we engage people to improve areas that we've seen that maybe kind of waned a little bit.
That's
I
good.
Add something real quick to
Yeah.
So just thinking about, one of the things is, as Chris is talking, when whether people work remotely or in the office, your A players are going to do whatever needs to be done. And they're going to work till midnight. They're going to come in early, or they're going to work at home until midnight and figure out how to get everything done. And then if you've got, B or C's, and we kind of look at our employees in that manner, as an executive team, and that your team is only as good as your weakest link, I think is how you say that. And so if you're not addressing, those issues, and it's really, really hard to address those issues remotely, it was for us, because you can't really necessarily see immediately the impact of someone who isn't as productive. And I know we're going to talk about this, but I think it's just something that to focus on is, really recognizing those A players and making sure that you show how much you appreciate their efforts, because those people, especially in these kinds of times, really are what, has helped to keep our company staying strong and continuing to go.
I think staying focused on celebrating successes is huge, right? We used to have bi-weeklies. We've shifted them to once a month, but the first thing on the bi-week, or on the monthly now, sorry, is we share wins, right? What people have accomplished since the previous meeting, and give them a shout, even just a shout out, right? We don't give them a reward for it or anything like that. It's just, hey, thank you, and this comes either from management or their team leads or whatever, but thank you. Hey, so-and-so went above and beyond, and this is what they did, or so-and-so had a project and they killed it. The client's happy. We do customer thermometer. We use a group called customer thermometer to get constant feedback from our clients, right? That they can take a quick 1-question survey. How do we do? And then when those come across my desk, I immediately shoot it out to the entire company and say, hey, great job, right? So they can see that somebody at the executive level is seeing it, and putting that out there. And one of the things I would tell you that we've done this for years, but it's really helped us from addressing productivity or people's performance, is we do quarterly reviews and peer evaluations on a quarterly basis. So this when you come into work for us, you have to be able to, again, stand up with your peers and say, here's what you're doing well, and here's what you need to do to improve. And you have to be receptive and open to getting that feedback. And so that helped us, having that in place helped us address issues with people that maybe we saw their production lag by working from home. And so having something like that in place, we're doing a continuous feedback or continuous improvement process, I think really helps.
Really good points, guys, but y'all are stealing my thunder. The next question is on that. I'm just kidding.
More to talk about.
But I bet that's what I was like. They must have some more information to add to this. So to all of you attendees, there was a question that was asked in one of my planning sessions with a Houston CFO. He may be on today, so he'll hear this question sound very familiar. Because it was coincidental. I'm like, gosh, I'm moderating a panel on this particular topic. And the question was, how do CFOs keep the culture in a remote workforce when you're seeing a slip in productivity? What advice would you give him? How are you dealing with those conversations? Jerry and Chris, you touched on that, but I know you have more, but I'm going to start with Kelly, more of the broader view of that. How would you advise him?
Yeah, and I think this advice would be the same for really any leader, whether it's the CFO, all the way down to a frontline leader. I think the reality is, much like what Chris shared, it's not necessarily about the review of the performance, but having more frequent performance coaching conversations that are really forward focused, right? What do we need to accomplish? How has it been going so far? What do we need to, carry forward that's working well? What do we need to do differently? What do you need from me? What support do you need from others? Those more frequent conversations with those in the sphere of direct report. And I think the CFO is in a great position, because what you can do is help tie in some ways potentially those conversations to compensation. And we've actually seen a number of organizations shift to that, where if you're not having those performance coaching conversations on a quarterly basis, it's going to hit your bonus as a manager. And so that's one thing to consider, is how do we make sure that people understand that's not extra to the job. The job of a leader is to be checking in with people frequently and having those conversations. And then I think helping give people, leaders particularly, giving them the tools, the expectations to be able to have the best possible conversations around those performance, discussions and coaching conversations as possible. And a lot of that really boils down to, making sure that people understand and do they believe in the why of what we're doing. And that comes from both top leader and direct manager communication. Do people have clarity on the what? A lot of that comes down to the direct manager's expectations, and particularly in COVID, we've seen and heard a lot of ambiguity around the what. People maybe still don't really understand what their expectations are. Are their expectations the same since COVID? Are their expectations different? And if so, what's the same and what's changed? So having those conversations is really important to continue to reinforce that, what's changed and what's not. Do people have what they need to carry out the how of their work? Do they have what they need to do their jobs? Jerry referenced this, right? I mean, couriering paper, and office supplies over to people's houses. Do people have what they need? Is there anything that's getting in the way of them doing their jobs in this COVID world? And then as a manager, doing everything in our power to either make sure they have what they need or to remove obstacles to them doing their jobs effectively. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, for all of these, and I mentioned this earlier, but Chris, I know reinforced this too. What mechanisms do you have in place to understand, are these conversations happening? Do people have clarity on expectations? And there's both objective and subjective data that we can tap into to understand those performance metrics. And then are the things happening with our workforce and with our leadership that help to drive those desired metrics forward, or do we need to do things differently? So just making sure that you're looking at that both from an individual leader perspective, and then also what systems and processes do we need to shift based on what it is that we need to do in those areas.
Really good. So it's the what, the why, and the how. I like that. I like how you frame that up. Real quick, Jerry and Chris, how are you balancing this with your team? I know you touched a little bit on it already.
Yeah, I think the first thing, again, just to reiterate, first, just make sure they're equipped with the right tools, much like our superintendents and, workers in the field need their hammers and all of that, make sure your office team and our finance team, that they have the right tools to be able to work remotely. But I think also too, one thing that I haven't mentioned is, don't be afraid to hold people accountable. I think when we first went into this environment in March, the controller and I, we were concerned and obviously need to be empathetic and make sure that people are equipped and they're able to do their jobs to the best of their ability. But we also had to hire people, and I know we're going to get to this too, but we had to hire people during this time. And, hiring brand new people that we didn't know if they were going to fit in with the company. And, and a couple of them didn't work out. And so that was tough because they didn't work out and it was obvious very quickly. And so we had mishired in those situations. And it was made evident to us because, again, with our, the type of work that we do, it's really clear when someone's not performing. If they're not getting their billing out, they're not getting, their checks cut, they're not getting people paid, the subs are complaining and, things like that. So I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways was it's hard, but don't be afraid to keep the expectations there of your team and keep them accountable, because you got to make sure they've been trained, got to make sure they have the right tools to do the job, but you also just need to make sure you have the right people and to not let this difficult situation enable you to keep employees that you probably shouldn't keep. And so that was something we went through a difficult time at the beginning of the year.
Really good point. What about you, Chris?
I'll dovetail on that, but I'm going to say that for our next topic, but to reemphasize that even on the equipment side, I mean, we have people with 2, 3, 4 monitors at their desk, wireless keyboards, wireless mouse, headsets, and so how are they don't have that environment at home, most of them. We have a lot of techies that do, but so and for someone who's got to maintain control of our physical assets, it made me nervous when people said, well, I want to come up and grab my monitors because we're not going to be back anytime soon. But So we had to be okay with that, right? We had to put a policy in place to make sure that we could track, okay, you've got which one by serial number and all that, but I want you to have whatever it is that you need to be successful. So if we have to replicate exactly what you have, if we have automated stand-up desk, you're not getting those. We're not. But if everything else, we made exceptions to allow people to have whatever equipment they needed to have to make the environment as similar as what they've had here, and I think that's gone a long way. We try to it's being flexible and helping them and understand how they can be the best they can be at their job. And I think if we show the flexibility, that again builds that trust, that comfort level that, hey, this company is telling, they're backing up their words and they're doing whatever they can to help me. And in return, we're hoping to get that again, that continued productivity. And the other thing that we've done is a lot of times people set goals and you may get to the end of the year and go, okay, so what did you accomplish this year? And then 12 months have passed by and you got to go back and revisit everything you've done. And so from an accountability perspective, not just with the quarterly reviews, but the teams and the individuals who have goals that are set up for the year, we've implemented quarterly reviews of those as well as an organization. So we sit there and go through each team's goals and objectives by quarter and review those. Where are we at? Where are we at on all of that, on all of our objectives for the year, and what are we lagging behind? Who's responsible or what's responsible? And just again be honest with ourselves about that. And the last thing I'll say is we have a mentoring program. Every employee in the company has a mentor, and so we leverage that mentor-mentee relationship and say, well, how often were you meeting pre-COVID? Oh, once a month or once a quarter. Well, you need to step that up, and you got to have it more frequently so that we can keep our finger on the pulse of our people, because those mentor meetings are not teach me how to do this or how did you handle or how do I process this widget or code this software. It's non-work related, right? It's professional development, personal development, and those things. And so we leverage that relationship that we know at least one person has that relationship one-on-one with them, and how can they keep touch with them and keep the conversation going.
Wow, that's really good points. Thanks for sharing that. Well, a really big focus of discussions lately has been how people are anticipating culture practices will evolve over the next year as the COVID situation evolves. Kelly, shed some light on this. What is your take on it?
Yeah, so I think the first and foremost question is, when we can go back, will we? And if so, what does that look like? And I think about how, the culture practices that you implement or that you adapt are going to stem largely from the decisions that are made around that question. But I will also note that, COVID has changed the implied employment contract, and many workers have now been given an unprecedented level of flexibility, empowerment, and visibility and transparency into leadership and to the organization's decisions. They're going to expect that to continue. And so that is going to be another key contention that organizations are going to have to wrestle with. And we just saw that just now with the poll, with a little more than half of the people on the call today saying, when we can go back, we'll do a full return to office. But the vast majority of American workers say that they strongly prefer to have some ability to work from home at least some of the time and to continue the flexibility. And so there is a mismatch now between what the employer's expectations are going to be once we can go back potentially, and what the workers, the employees now expect in terms of what the organization can offer them in terms of this flexibility, empowerment, and communication, transparency, visibility. And if those things are taken away, that's going to be felt as a significant loss. Not only will that impact the culture, without that being managed effectively, that's not only going to impact the culture, that could also, really impact the ability to bring in new talent, because from a recruitment perspective, talent is going to expect some of that. And we've seen a lot of organizations look at this as, again, an opportunity to say, you know what, we're not just going to do what we have to do. We're going to see how can we really differentiate ourselves as an employer of choice and be kind of on the leading, side of this, of embracing this and saying that we're going to, make some of these changes permanent so that we can be, an exceptional place to work that attracts top talent. And I'm not saying that's right for every organization or that every organization should do that. But it's just going to be some really important questions that every top, leadership team is going to have to figure out around what is our philosophy around what it means to work here, and what are we going to offer to people. And if that is going to change, how are we going to communicate that over time so that we can ease people back into this and it doesn't feel like a culture shock.
Yeah, true. Very true. Chris, would you add any to this particular question?
I think it's a fluid process, right? I think, back in April of last year, there's the talk that, with Manhattan, for example, being a ghost town, or the downtown areas, the high density buildings being ghost towns, and, you saw rentals or vacancies in office space drop, by 50%, and then non-payments would be even a much higher percentage. But what's interesting is we're looking to potentially expand our space right now. Now, granted, we've got to because of COVID, we've had to spread desks further apart. So what we thought we could get 50 people in a space, we can only get 30. And so in talking to our broker, this week, they're starting to see an uptick. I mean, there's definitely a lot of subleases out there available, but they are starting to see an uptick of people coming back. And I think it's going to change. I think as people get comfortable with, vaccination, and what is the human response to this particular illness, and how does that adapt over time? And so, I saw a study, that I mentioned earlier today, and it said 95% of all of the people polled want to be back in the workplace in some way, shape, or form, right? Not necessarily full time, but there's a desire to be with the people that you work with, right? To some extent. I mean, there's certain people that don't want to, but that's an encouraging statistic, because it tells you that there's meaning in being around other people and working with them. Now, does that mean 95% of them only want to be back 2 days a week? I don't know, but that's encouraging. And then you've got to balance that as an employer with what you want and what you see as the best for your company, and how the employees will react and what they're acceptable or willing to accept. And then I think the other thing that's important is, people have been taking advantage of the time of working remote, right? We've had people go to Florida, for example, and work from there for a month, right? And with their families. And I don't care where you are, as long as you're working and you're not distracted. But what we are now starting to see people, well, I'm going to go move out into Montana and live in the country. And we're like, we got to draw the line here, because where are you moving? And we're a technology company, so you can't just go move to the mountains that doesn't have connectivity, right? Or you have issues with connectivity. Why? Because that decreases your productivity, and it creates more hurdles for you to be able to do your job. So you got to find that balance, and so we've had to let the people know that there's only so far that we can push this, that we're willing to push it. And so kind of just setting those boundaries for them to help them understand, like, where's the line.
Yeah.
So,
true. Jerry, what about you?
Yeah, I think it's always hard to take things back. So, to be, more conservative up front. We're in the middle right now of looking at some hybrid of a telecommute policy where people can work from home 1 day a month is what we're looking at the moment. It's not a lot, but we feel like it's a baby step in that direction to allow some flexibility. And it was a big debate for our executive team. We meet weekly and spend a significant amount of time each week at our executive team meetings going through all of our issues with our business. And it was, this was probably a 2-hour conversation about, how is that going to impact our business if we allow people to work from home 1 day a month on a consistent basis? And what does that look like? Do they pick the day? Do we tell them which day? What if they can't be at home that day because they have an on-site meeting, things like that. So there's so many things to consider and think through. And we're not there yet, to tell you the truth. We're still in the process of tweaking our what our policy looks like, so we feel comfortable with it, that it's a win-win for both sides, for the business and for the employee. But I will say that one thing that's changed about how we have meetings that I thought it's kind of relevant to this topic. Even now, with all of us back in the office full time, we're still doing Zoom meetings, just because not only of COVID and staying out of the conference room, but now that we do have some people who have to work from home because they've got an impacted spouse, or they've got someone has compromised health condition, we do have some people working from home full time. And we have people in our Dallas office, or we have people in our Austin office. So in the past, if there was a conference call with people, 3 people from Houston and 1 from Dallas, the 3 people from Houston would go into the conference room and put the Dallas person up on a TV. And that really isolated that person. They were by themselves on a video call while the rest of us were socializing and talking and meeting. And so I've made it a practice, at least with our team, that everybody now is just participating via Zoom. And I think equalizing that for everyone has been a huge positive. And that's something that I won't go back from. We're all equipped now. We can all do it that way. And I think it just makes it for a more even playing field when you have people who are remote when they're at another office location.
Very true. Very true. Well, we are at the top of the hour, actually 5 minutes after. I want to open up for Q&A. Do we have any questions to ask everyone? And if we don't, we can talk about some technology and onboarding and how that is all affected in the market as well. But let's pause. Anybody want to take themselves off or on video, put themselves on video and unmute your lines? You're welcome to do that now.
Hi, gang. This is Rob Andrews. I've actually been a speaker on one of your panels before.
Yes, I remember. Hi, Rob. How are you?
I'm great. Decided to just chime in and see what was going on, and we're trying to figure out what we're doing in this new environment. We've gone through a bunch of cultural change over the last 18 months, and would love to share that with the group at a later point. But I just wanted to chime in and say this has been great, and I look forward to spending time with everyone going forward.
Great. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm going to ask a kind of a personal business question. You can answer this if you want to, if you will, but how much did the COVID quarantining and working from home for the different presenters affect your revenue for the year?
I'll start if you want. You know, being that we deal with mostly investment managers, obviously as the economy goes and changes in the economy, so does their business and their willingness to spend with us. So we ended up being relatively flat year over year on a revenue basis. But what was interesting is we thought we were going to lose more just because, again, the nature, people were anticipating hedge funds were going to start closing up shop because they were going to get hit tremendously by the pandemic. But if a hedge fund's doing what it's supposed to be doing, it's supposed to be hedging the good versus the bad, and that they should be able to withstand downturns in the market. And so that ended up happening, which was good. And we only lost a few clients that shut their doors. But what we found was towards the end of the year, just like we all have to go through and adapt our business practices and identify what's core to us, where do we need to pivot, where do we need to make changes, both internally and externally, they did as well. And what they found was they had for far too long accepted the status quo with their vendors. And so what we're seeing is a renewed focus on, I need to get better at doing things. I need to get more efficient at doing things. I got to get more productivity out of my company and improve my bottom line, basically improve their margins to be able to withstand another hit to their revenue, right? And so towards the end of the year, we saw a massive uptick in orders and new opportunities And so that going into 2020 or 2021 has been a huge uplift for us. Now, again, we're a cloud-based software company, so we were able to practice what we preach. We were able to go remote in an instant, and we were able to take our clients who had always worked with desktops in high-rise buildings and, you know, geographically dispersed all throughout like New York and New Jersey, or all over the Dallas Metroplex, or all over Northern and Southern California, and instantly get them remote activity, right? And so they saw the value in that and go, wow, why am I still doing my archaic way of doing things with, you know, data rooms and heavy type of equipment? How can I get more flexible? These guys have done it. We've been doing it for the last 10 years. How can I leverage that? And so that's been really helpful for us.
Good. Yeah.
For us in commercial construction, we were, you know, coming into the year 2020, we anticipated the same high revenue growth that we've been experiencing, because our company's been on a trajectory of growth. It's been really kind of crazy, to be honest, but we've grown. When I came here in 2010, we were about a $20 million company, and 2019 we surpassed 500 million. So we had expected 2020 to do, you know, be even bigger and greater. We didn't finish that as well as we had hoped. We had a very strong year considering everything that happened, but we were probably down between 5 and 10% in revenue from last year. I think the most important thing for us in the construction industry is what's coming. The economists are predicting that that basically everything has just been put on pause, that the construction that, you know, would have come last year that we had anticipated, a lot of that was put on pause. A lot of funding has been delayed, financing has been delayed. But once we're past the vaccine and past the pandemic, then 2022 is anticipated to be a lot like 13 and 14 was in terms of just growth in this area in Houston, you know, Dallas and Texas in general. We're a Texas-based contractor. And what we've been trying to do to help offset some of that is we're looking at, you know, growing our business regionally. So we just opened an office in Austin. We're looking at Denver. We started a project in Phoenix. And so a lot of contractors are just diversifying, you know, geographically and different product types, building different types of construction to see if we can just continue to diversify our revenue and maintain, you know, where we've gotten to. So it's been very challenging, but at the same time, you know, it's given us an opportunity to really kind of get outside the box and look at what we can do differently. And so we're really very bullish about what's coming in the next 12 to 24 months for us.
That's great. Thank you, Jerry.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Roy, for the great question. Anyone else? We do have a few minutes to spare.
I think one just popped up in the chat today.
Did it?
I think so.
How do you oh, yes, Mr. Dean. How do you tell employees who have been working successfully from home for 10 months they need to physically return to the office to be successful? Yeah. How do you do that, Chris?
That's the million-dollar question, right? As we're trying to figure out how to bring people back safely. We're at 30% right now. All volunteer people wanting to be back in the office. It has not been mandated. We've toiled with that and struggled with that. Talked to a lot of people about that. But we're trying to figure out ways. It comes back to, you know, I felt like I was very successful in what I was doing at home, but I also feel that there's an importance to being back in the office and being around our people. And so it's balancing that, what we think is important to our culture and our success versus the individual productivity. And so it goes beyond just a single person and how well they've been doing and performing to what's best for the entire company. But we have to balance that. We can't bring everybody back in right now. We're out of space. So do we bring in our core dev team for 1 or 2 days a week and nobody else, right? Do we bring in our operations team for 1 or 2? We're a wide open space out here, so we don't have individual suites or anything like that. But then there's the people who want to be here every day. So how do you balance all of that? So we're still navigating that. Unfortunately, I don't have the answer. I think it comes back to helping us understand that person and that person understand what we feel is the best for this company to be successful holistically and not just individually. That's not the
Right.
best I can offer at the moment.
Kelly, would you add something to that from an expert view?
I would agree with everything Chris said. I think the only thing I might add is emphasizing the why, right? Because like I said, this goes back to this employment contract. I think many workers, even if they are required to go back, if they do not understand or believe in the why of why they have to give up that flexibility and freedom, perceived flexibility and freedom, if they did not want to go back to the office 100% of the time or have a change in that, and they had been productive and it hadn't been impacting their productivity, they're going to need to understand the why, or else you are going to lose them from an engagement perspective, and potentially they could choose to go elsewhere once the job market turns around, and good talent has good choices, and so I think keeping in mind, just like any good change, if people do not understand the why and they don't believe in the why, you're not going to be able to bring along hearts and minds, even if you can bring along bodies.
I think you're right. You have to be willing to if that's the case, you may end up parting ways with people that you wouldn't otherwise part ways with, but it's a mutual thing, right? There's a lot of leverage on the employee side, depending on where you are, right? In North Texas, right? We're getting a lot of pressure from candidates on with hiring, and we try to be as flexible as we can, but again, we got to stay core and true to ourselves. And what makes our business work. And we've polled our people, right? I don't think we would even be considering it if 99% of our people said, no, I don't want to be back, right? So if it's the outliers, why is it the outlier, right? What's the personal reason to why you want to stay remote when you were perfectly fine, by the way, coming in the office beforehand? And we obviously have to make it safe and keep that on the forefront, but it's just going to have to be a conversation that you continue to work with. And I think Kelly hit on the head. It's understanding, helping them understand the why and getting them bought in.
Beautifully said, Kelly, beautifully said. We have reached our time limit, and I have thoroughly enjoyed this discussion. Chris, Jerry, and Kelly, y'all were excellent. All of you on the call today, if you a topic that's similar to we touched on, and it is affects the culture of the organization, is about the vaccines coming out. The Phoenix chapter is doing a program on vaccines in the workplace. We have an employment attorney heading that up, which will be pretty interesting if you want to join that. If you're a member of the CFO Leadership Council, I encourage you to go to your Slack channel and grab that link. I can send it to you too if you want to message me. But our next program is an excellent one. It's the economic update of 2021, a month after the new administration. And, we're at day one today. I guess maybe it was yesterday. And February 18th, we should have a good discussion. And it's the chief economist for RSM, Joe, last name Brucelis. He's excellent, great speaker. So you won't want to miss that. You can find the links. The registration is open on NYM in your membership portal, or message me. All of you, enjoy the rest of your day. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks again for attending. Have a great day.
Thank you, speakers. Enjoyed it.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Roy.
Take
Thanks
care.
all.